What's up, everybody? In today's video, we're going to talk about music theory. You guys have been asking me about it a ton, so here's like the dedicated video. Alright, so before we really get into the details, kind of a little background on this. I've been live streaming a lot more on YouTube lately than I have been making content. And that's really because I just don't really know what else to talk about or what you guys are interested in. But one thing that's been completely, just transparent is that a lot of you have questions about music theory. So the things that we're going to talk about in this video are: 1, do I think music theory is, should everybody learn it? 2, if so, where do we get started with it? Because sometimes it feels like mathematics, right? Alright, so should you learn music theory? I'm going to say that, I'm biased. I have a degree in music production. I believe everybody should know a little bit of theory, but there are great guitar players who can play circles around me and probably you that know zero theory, or they claim they don't at least. So the value proposition for studying music theory is kind of like studying a language, right? So, I'm American, I speak English, that's my predominant language. So do I think, my question to you is do you need to study English to be able to have intelligent conversation? No, there are a lot of people who are illiterate. However, I think we can both agree that we can have deeper conversations and better articulate our ideas with studying grammar and just the language in general, right? I think the same is true for music theory. A lot of people like to think that music is like a mathematics or a science, and it's not. While it does have those aspects, it's really a language. So I think if you approach theory from a language perspective versus a science perspective, then I think it's absolutely worth your while. Do I think you need to go off the deep end and know everything about music? Absolutely not. So what I'm going to show you today is kind of like the basics, kind of like a college level 101. And if you're interested in what I show you in this video, send me a message on Instagram and I'll shoot you a free ebook that has all of this and more details. And you can shoot me a message at Damion Andy, or most preferably the Guitar Artistry program. All right, let's jump into it. So the theory I think everybody needs to know is diatonic theory. Don't get scared by big name, right? All that means is learning how to play in one key. The key that I'm gonna choose is C major. I know as a guitar player, you might be thinking, why would you study C major? We should be studying E. Our guitar is in E. It's tuned in E. Because C major is easy to understand. That's why. It's called the college key for a reason. And that's because everything is natural. If I tell you to play a C major 7, the notes are very easy. If I ask you, hey, how do I make that into a C minor 7? You'll know it's easier to talk flats than it is to be like, oh yeah, E, the F sharp becomes a, it's just easier to keep track of everything while we're learning. And I'm a firm believer that it's kind of like Bruce Lee. I'd much rather play with someone who knows one key really well than some person who doesn't know 12 keys hardly at all. So if you study C major and you really spend enough time and marinate in it, the other keys, they'll really show themselves to you. They'll present themselves to you. Yeah, you'll have to learn some semantics of how to speak in that language. But as a guitar player, we're really creatures of patterns on this instrument. So don't be scared if you're like, oh, C major only, we're not getting into anything else. Trust me on this. If you've watched my live streams, trust me, one key, that's all you should be focusing on. The first thing we need to talk about is how do we know if we're going to be major or minor, right? The first thing, I guess we'll kind of do basic levels. We're going to be talking about 2 different ways of thinking about chords. There's one way, which is the classical way, which is saying, hey, this is C, E, D, F, G, A, B, C. Sorry, if you try to think and play at the same time, sometimes it messes you up. And then there are other guys who go, hey, this is actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. That's called the natural number system. We're going to be using both. I'm going to say C major, and then I'm going to tell you, hey, this chord is made up of 1, 3, 5, 1. When I say those numbers, all that I am referring to are intervals. Or scale degrees is probably more accurate. Intervals would be the 1 to the 3, 3 to the 5, 5 to the 1. Those are intervals. Alright, so in any given key, our 1, which in this case is C major, our 4, which if we go 1, 2, 3, 4, F is major, and our 5, which is G, is major. In any given major key, your 2 is going to be minor, so C2 is D, D minor. Your 3 is going to be minor, which is E. And your your 6 is going to be minor, which is A. The only chord that is going to be interesting that you don't see a lot in traditional music, you'll see it a lot in jazz and fusion. It's really more like a leading tone. Like, I would never play this on isolation and vamp on it, but I might use it to pull some tension and resolve, and that's diminished. Alright? You know, the next common question I get a lot is like, one, you're just gonna have to memorize that, and just trust me. Until you write it out on paper and you start seeing the intervals, just trust me, that's what it is. 1, 4, 5 major, 2, 3, 6 minor, 7 diminished. At the very beginning, what's really beneficial is to know when something is major versus minor. Alright, so any major chord is going to be made up of the 1, which is C, the 3rd, which is E, the 5th, which is G, and the 1, which is C, right? Our octave, our cowboy chord. If I want to make this C minor, then I'm going to keep everything the same, but I'm going to lower the 3rd. So this E is now going to be E flat. And here's C minor. So remember, major, you're going to go 1, 3, 5. Minor, 1, flat 3, 5. For diminished is kind of interesting. Diminished is you're going to take your 3rd and your 5th and you're going to flatten them. That fingering is kind of hard to do on guitar without doing this hand shape. That's why it's slightly different, but it would be, the arpeggio would be, this is C major, this is C minor, this is C diminished. Okay, just something to keep in your mind. So step 1, for you to really understand what we're talking about, I'm going to encourage you to learn these chords. C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, and I add the D here, so technically, and then A minor. All these are open cowboy chords. B diminished. Don't actually be diminished, but it's just the chord name. And then C major. The reason why I start there, this is considered the open position. Now, positional playing can be a whole video in itself, but the easiest way to remember is wherever my pointer finger is, that's the position I'm in. So if my hand is only playing on the 5th fret, I'm in 5th position. So, okay, let's say you get that right, and you're like, okay, appreciate the beginner stuff. How do I already know that? Where do I go from there? This is where I would start looking into extended chords. I'm a big fan of math rock and like technical guitar playing. So a lot of times in math rock, you'll start off with hearing a lot of 7th chords. You'll also hear like 6 add 9 and sus2. Again, for keeping it in terms of getting you just up and running with diatonic theory, we're only going to focus on 7ths. It's just if you already know 7ths, then start learning your 6s and 9s. Learn your 6s. You know, you can even do like 7th. You can work on sus2 and then adding different stuff in it. You can work on the 9th chord shapes. I use that a lot in my writing lately. But if you're not there yet, then the first thing we're going to do is we're going to focus on 7ths and we're going to focus on arpeggios. Again, I understand this is a lot, so if you want all this written out where you can actually take your time and study it, you got 2 options. Go back and study this video. We got 3 options. You can join the Patreon. Everything I just said has already been posted probably 2 or 3 times on Patreon in different keys. And third, if you send me a message on Instagram, I'll shoot you a free copy of my PDF. If you're already a Patreon member, it's a PDF that's included with your membership. All right, so let's take a look at our arpeggios and building out chords. So you may have heard the term arpeggio, but you may not really know what it means. Arpeggios is basically if I take the individual notes of a chord and if I break it up, I arpeggiate it, then that's what an arpeggio is. You know, it's just when I take those arpeggios and I put them together, I form chords. So we're going to look at the building blocks of those, kind of like the individual Lego blocks, if you will. So we need to talk numbers, and you're just going to have to trust me here. I'm just going to show you shapes. I encourage you to sit down and write all this out. The formula you're going to use for the chords I'm going to show you is grab a note, skip a note, grab a note, skip a note, grab a note, skip a note, grab a note. So if I did that right, we should go C, skip D, grab E, skip F, grab G, skip A, grab B, C major 7. All that means is we're going to grab 1, 3, 5, 7, 1. Our first arpeggio shape we're starting only on the A string. You'll have to do this for the A string and the E string, and then there's some tricks we can do for the bottom three. But we're not there yet. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to look at arpeggios using the A string. And from here on out, that's the only string I'm using. If you are an overachiever, then the next thing you want to do is learn how to go. But really all we're going to do is... What I'm thinking about when I'm doing this shape, and this is a major shape, so this will work for F major, and it'll work for C. So your 1 and the 4 are going to be the same. Each finger is going to get its own fret. With this is the hand shape for a major 7. I have the 3rd fret of the A string, the 2nd fret of the D string, the 5th fret of the D string, 4th fret of the G string, that's our 7th, and then our octave, which is the 5th fret here. So this also is the Stranger Things theme. So if you want something fun to practice, it's way better than, you know, that Stranger Things song, but there's some old heads like, whoa, triggered. That's C major. Now let's look at D minor. All right, so D minor is going to be very similar. Just remember, to make minor, we have to flatten the 3rd, and it also, in this case, we're going to flatten the 7th. So if we take that same major shape, that would technically be D major, but we got to flatten the 3rd, so we're going to go. 5th is still the same. This would be a major 7th, but now we got to drop that down. Because in this regard, the 7th will always follow the 3rd. So if we're going to do minor, we're going to drop the 3rd. We're also going to drop the 7th. All right, so now that arpeggio is going to look like this. We're going to slide up. We're going to do the same thing with E major. So that minor shape. And in my mind, it's kind of like you're forming like a cool triangle. You know, you're going here, you're going here, you're going here, and you're going here. So if I were to do all 4 fingers at the same time, it makes like this symmetrical shape. That's minor. Whereas major shape would look like this. You know? Hopefully that makes sense. Jazz. All right. So now the next thing we gotta do is look at is F major. F major, easy. It's gonna be the same as C major. So remember this. Started at the 8th fret. Now you're doing F. Now, the 5th is where things get interesting. Not crazy, just interesting. What we're going to do with the 5th, and in this case we're talking about G major. G major is, your 5th is considered dominant when we introduce, well, it's always considered dominant, but when we introduce the 7th, it becomes a dominant chord, so it'll be a G7 chord. All that means is that the 3rd is going to remain major, but our 7th is going to flatten. So the reason why that comes into play is, think, if we're in G major has an F sharp in the key. Okay? But we're in the key of C major. C major does not have an F sharp. It only has an F natural. So we got to change that F sharp to an F natural. When we do that, that now becomes dominant. So now, you know, you can think of this as the Hendrix chord. Anyways. You just gotta remember that. That's gonna trick you up for a long time until you just sit here and do like what I've done for hours. If that tricks you up, the thing to practice is going F major, G dominant. So slow. Alright, that's it. And a big deal. Next thing we gotta look at is A minor, and not the Drake song or whatever song that is. This is the chord. I love playing a Strat. I don't play with a trim enough, so I'm being a child right now. Alright, A minor. It's the same thing as D minor. Same thing as E minor. A minor. Okay? Don't overthink it. The next thing string, which is kind of tricky, is the dominant, or the diminished. And this is technically, when we start getting into more than 4 chords, like with the 7th, this is considered half diminished. I think I said dominant a minute ago, that's incorrect. This is B half diminished. So it's half diminished because we're only doing a minor 7th. So, this is a little nerdy. If I'm just looking at the 7th, because the 5th and the 4th have special rules. But with the 7th, if I flatten it, it's minor. If I double flatten it, it's diminished. So technically, we're only doing a half diminished because we have a minor 3rd, a diminished 5th, and a minor 7th. I told you the 5th is kind of weird. The 5th is because if I lower it, it's called diminished. If I raise it, it's called augmented. So you just got to remember these little quirky rules. But again, for the grand scheme of things of what we're doing, irrelevant. I'm just showing you what this is just for like if you really want to study something, this is like the theory. But what I encourage you to do is just to practice these hand shapes. So that hand shape is going to so those frets are going to be the 14th, which is just our B. Now here we go, Jiro. So 14, 12, 15, 14, 16. Alright, and then lastly, we're back at tonic. We're back at home, C major. So, I know that's a lot. Go back and rewind it. Again, reach out to me on Instagram. I'll shoot you the free PDF, I don't care. But, let's talk about practice strategies. First thing, you gotta get the mechanics down before you can really understand how valuable what I just taught you is for songwriting. And we'll study that in a different video. I don't want to get too lost in the sauce. I want this to be like your music theory 101 lesson, and then you just spend a lot of time here. But the most important thing to do is get those arpeggios down. So what I want you to do for an exercise is work on doing this arpeggio pattern. I'm just gonna go up the scale, and you can work on coming back down, but this video would probably be too long if I showed you everything. So here it is. And play slow. Listen, I was in the Marine Corps. In the Marine Corps, we had a saying, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Practice slow, get smooth, and speed will come. So here it is. Cool, right? Sounds really cool. I use this all the time, especially like with my sweep picking stuff, and we'll talk about this in a future video. Don't worry, we can't cover everything in one video, otherwise this will be 10 hours long. And I know ain't nobody got time for that. Y'all barely watch my 10-minute videos. Alright, so that should be enough to get you started. If that makes sense, the next thing I want you to work on is making your own chords. So I'm going to show you 2 chord shapes. In music theory, the 5th is kind of boring, honestly. Power chords, that's just 1, 5, 1. So yeah, you can do something basic and write cool songs like... Right? That's not cool. We want to write... Right? We want to write cool stuff. Unless you don't, then okay. But anyways, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on chord shapes. I don't really look up chords anymore. I just kind of piece stuff together interval-wise. So we're going to do a major 7th with the 3rd voicing, and then a major 7th with the 5th voicing, so you can hear the difference. Same chord, different choice of notes. So remember, the 5th is boring, so we're going to scratch it. So the first thing we're going to do... gets its own here, and that's kind of going to be the theme for all these chords. Or you can do this voicing. They're the same chord, the difference is this has a 5th and the 3rd is on the bottom. This is C major 7, no 5, technically. You're going to hear this in my music a ton because this just has so much more color to it, in my opinion, than this. I try to avoid the 5th at all costs. Alright, let's look at the 2nd. So D minor. We have D minor 2nd. You've probably seen this chord shape before. The the other form of it. This is technically a D minor 9. Trust me on studying this version of it. If you start writing things in Dorian, you'll appreciate it, because then you can go. But if you just want to play a D minor 7th, you just gotta make sure you're hitting the F, which is the 6th fret of your B string. But drop it and do that 9. Very nice, I like you. Alright. Same thing with the E. You've got this with the 5th. The E, you gotta be tricky though. The minor doesn't work because there's no F sharp in C major. So you actually have to do like a minor 7th here. So going all the way down, that's 7, 5, 7, 8. Alright, and then F. F is the same as C, and your 4th will always be that. You can also that's the 9th. Or everything we just said here applies. 4 to 1, baby. 4 to 1. Throw a couple of lyrics on there, it'd be like every country star ever. The only chord you're missing is the 5th. Alright, and that's kind of like cool dominant. When it comes to the 5th though, I kind of do keep the 5th in there. But it's like this. I'm sorry, you're hearing Charlie Brown. He's in the studio with me today. You've been good, buddy. No, we're almost done. You hang out. Tell me this video's too long. Alright. Same thing there. We're just going to go 10, 12, 10, 12. Don't overthink it. You can also do this shape. You just do that 7 and then drop that F to an F sharp. If your hand isn't stretchy enough yet, it will be. You keep playing these chords. Alright, next thing we're going to do is A minor. It's the same here. Your D minor shapes are going to work for this. So that's our A minor 9. Last one we got to look at is just that diminished shape. That diminished shape is going to be the same down here on the 2nd fret. So we're looking at 2, 3, 2, 3. It's got a really cool sound to it. Alright, well, hey, that's going to conclude our first music theory lesson. This is a lot. What I hope that this video serves as is like a good reference for you just to continuously keep coming back to. Because I promise you, the more time you spend here, the more other stuff is going to make sense. Like, I can always tell when a beginner jumps on because they ask me what scales to study, and I'm like, well, you know, how's your understanding of the major scale? And they're like, oh, why do I need to study the major scale? It's boring. That's because all Western music is based off of the major scale. It's called a tetrachord. So before you start learning any scales or anything else, learn what we just went over. Learn the chord shapes. Learn them in the cowboy chord position first, like that open position. Then learn them up and down the A string. If you're a go-getter, learn it on the E string. Then learn it on the bottom 4 strings without using the top 2 strings. Work your way up on the note. You know, if I say, hey, play C major, you should be able to say C major 7, C major, C major, C major, C major 7, C major 7. You know, like, you should be able to pull this out up and down the fretboard just from an instinctual knowledge. And until you get there, I wouldn't really be worrying about scales and everything else. In the next video that we do in this series, I'm going to show you some stuff to think about when it comes to scales. But plot twist, everything you should be doing is going to be from the major scale, because all the quote-unquote sexy stuff is just a half step away from the major. But if you don't understand the major scale, you're going to be spinning your tires trying to find this magic scale to make you sound good, when in reality, this is the important work. So I hope this video helped you out. If it did, make sure you hit a like, subscribe, all the typical YouTube stuff. And again, if you want a free copy of the PDF that I was referencing, where I write all this out and it has like reference notes, shoot me a message at Guitar Artistry Program on Instagram, and I'll make sure you get hooked up with a free copy of it. And if I don't see your message, leave me a comment on here too of what your tag is on Instagram, and I'll come find you and send it to you. So hey, hopefully this helps. See you in the next video. Peace.